Okay, so last time I did a workshop, it was on retrieval augmented generation. And today I'm going to be doing a workshop on fine tuning. And this is a very complex topic. So I would say just bear with me. The first half would be a bit theoretical, but then I have created a tutorial so you understand. So I wanted to put in as everything that was there in this space. So as you know, large language models, they are based on the encoder decoder architecture. And in order to understand how to fine tune models, we first need to understand this architecture. And for this specific workshop, I will be focusing only on the decoder architecture because that's what we would be fine tuning. We would be fine tuning only the decoder and not the encoder. And the application for fine tuning would be to create conversational agents, text summarization, machine translation, etc. But before I get started, I wanted to ask you guys, when do you guys think we should be when we should be fine-tuning large language models instead of using RAGs? If you could write it down, put it in the chat.
All right, we're gonna give ourselves a couple minutes for people. To be honest, I want to highlight, there's no wrong answer here because whatever answer you provide, Neeraj will be able to kind of give you feedback and say why it's true or not true. And that is going to be your learning, right? So feel free to, do your best, like take a guess on why you think, when you think fine tuning would be relevant versus RAGs. And it would be interesting to kind of discuss that. So, and if anybody wants to just like kind of share their thoughts as well, maybe we could do that as well. Okay, so Shrikant wrote, when we need it for a certain kind of task that is specific and not generic. Curious to know, what do you think?
Uh, Not really, but yeah, okay. It's optimizing the output of the model, increasing accuracy and decreasing hallucinations is for RAGs, yeah. So yeah, the answer is if you want to align, if you have a very domain specific use case and you want to create a domain specific model, you want to align the output in a way that is very domain oriented, then you would be using fine tuning. But let's continue. The focus was to understand the encoder decoder architecture. And in this workshop, we would be fine tuning a decoder model. Now, what is the transformer decoder architecture? So the decoders are used to predict the next word based on the previous context. So I will not get too much into the mathematics behind this, but all you need to understand is that when you have a decoder model, it tries to predict the next word based on the input in its neighboring region. And each of these neighboring region, they are given some kind of attention, some kind of weights. And based on these weights, the model tries to predict the next word. And there are different strategies to do this. So there are different decoding strategies. There is the greedy search strategy. There is beam search, sampling, temperature scaling, and top. You don't need to know this, but if as a product manager, if you are working for a company where you are training your own models, then this would become important. But for this workshop, try to just understand the greedy search. That's what is the most probable next word. And now there are different types of decoder models. We have the pre-trained models. That's models like GPT-3. Then there is fine-tuned decoders, pre-trained models fine-tuned on specific tasks like summarization or translation. And then there is a third category called instruction tuning. And they are trained to follow specific instructions for specific tasks. And now this becomes important as product managers, you would have to make a decision if you should be using an open source model like Llama or a proprietary one like ChatGPT. And both have pros and cons. With the open source model, you can do a lot more customization, but it's expensive to maintain these models. And proprietary, you get it as a service, but you cannot customize it as per your use case. So the next concept in this space is to understand reinforcement learning from human feedback. Now, when you have these large language models, you want to fine tune these models. How do you fine tune? You want the first way is to put a human in between, get the feedback, and train the model again. But this is, of course, a very expensive process, and not all companies would have resources to do this. But this is how companies like ChatGPT, the models that are offered by ChatGPT, this is the strategy behind getting those kinds of output. The one that we would be looking at is supervised fine tuning. That is, we create our own custom input output data set, and we use a base model, and on top of that base model, we would be fine tuning our own custom model. I know this is a bit theoretical, but I just wanted to, the focus of this workshop was to give you a overview of everything that's happening in this space. But once you look at my tutorial, it will become much more clear. The second strategy is using a reward modeling. So instead of putting a human in between, uh, you can model the reward, and the advantage with reward modeling is you can create a separate model, and you can use that model's output to fine tune your model to get the feedback. And advantage is that you can do this fully offline, so you don't need an online training approach. So the next few concepts is what's relevant for this workshop. And if you get time after the workshop, it would be nice to read some of these research papers. The first approach to fine tuning, it's called direct preference optimization. And instead of using a human in the loop, uh, we pose the human feedback as a classification problem, and we optimize the parameters. So this is a interesting approach. It requires a bit of maths to understand this, but not relevant for product managers. What you need to understand is the trade-off between RLHF and DPO. So I was wondering, Bijan, are there any questions?
All right, so let's take a few minutes here. I know we kind of went through a bunch of topics right now. Do people have any questions on what we discussed? Like, is it clear, for example, what we meant by reward model? Do you guys have any questions? Like, feel free to raise your hand and share your questions. Okay, gonna wait a couple minutes for people to maybe share their thoughts. Okay, Vishy, go ahead.
Yeah, Bijan, this is a lot of stuff. So, I think all of us need to take some time reading up on this and getting familiar. It'll be difficult to come up questions without that. The high level concepts are, pretty easy to grasp. But, if you're going into an interview and somebody asks you what is PEFT, then, we better understand those pretty well. What is your view on how the PM interviews would be done? Would they go to this level of depth and ask about the specific strategies or methodologies?
Yeah, good question. So, by the way, I would say Kai and Corey are better people to answer this question. But from my conversation with Kai and Corey, I would say that they think you need to know what these topics are at a very high level, like what the mechanics of it is, like how it works. But they will not necessarily directly asking you a question on this, but they might like kind of ask you a question to kind of see that you understand the concept. Like, depending on how much you're going to be doing any sort of fine tuning in your job, in most cases, you will not be so involved as a PM, but you need to have a high level understanding of like, when does it make sense to use fine tuning? What are like the different approaches? What sort of resources do you need at a high level? So make sure you understand that. And I would also ask Kai and Corey to maybe share with you guys what their view on knowing the level of detail on fine tuning is. But my guess is that like you don't need to have like so much technical details on how it works. But go ahead, Sherry.
Hi. Actually, I lost connection in between when Neeraj was trying to explain that why we will need fine tuning in some cases versus using RAG. Can you please repeat what are those cases or scenarios where that one is more important than another?
So if your use case is searching something, that's when you would be using RAGs. But if your use case is generating text, aligning to your domain specific data, let's say you are working in medical industry and you want a summary of documents in a specific format, and that's when you would be fine tuning a model to have the output in a specific way in the language that the doctors write.
Right.
That's one
Okay.
use case. So if it's something very domain specific, you would be
Right.
using fine tuning.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think these
Okay,
slides
great.
are a bit
I think let me
overwhelming.
just let me see if there are any other questions. Is there any other question from anybody that would like to ask before we move on?
Just probably housekeeping thing. If you could give us a few more seconds to read through the slides, because it's quite fast that we are moving through them.
Right.
And another question, will you be able to share the slides after the workshop?
Yeah, for sure. So
yeah.
we will be sharing them on the community page. So have you seen the AIPM community page?
No.
Okay, so let me just quickly share the link with you. This is the link. This is where you have to go. We upload all the recordings in here. So we will share them with you guys. You'll have a link to the files as well. But yes, thanks for the feedback. I'm kind of moving a little bit slowly on the slides as well.
Thanks, Bijan.
Okay.
No problem.
I think I would move to my tutorial. It would become much more clear. The purpose of the slides was to give you a theoretical foundation, but I realized that it can be a bit overwhelming. So I'm just going to move to my notebook.
Okay, so both Anand and Kritika, would it be okay if we answer your questions after we go through the quick workshop? Would that be okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So I have created a short workshop, a tutorial, and I think this will be more interesting for you. So what is it that we are doing? So we have a base model, and I introduce you to the concept of SFT and PFT, but that's not important for you to understand. What's important is that you take the base model, you put some data, and you have certain configuration hyperparameters that you would be using to train a model. And then the output is a fine-tuned model. And then you would, for different types of tasks, I will explain the task for this notebook. You would be using this fine-tuned model to do some kind of inference. That's a high-level overview of training your own model. The advantage with fine-tuning is that you are not training the model from scratch. You are just training the last few parameters in the base model. So this is the core architecture of these are the steps that you would have to follow to fine-tune a model. So I just prepared a workshop. Of course, I cannot fine-tune the model right now because it takes 20 minutes to train the model. So I have already trained my model, and it's in this directory. But I will show
Share the
you.
link as well.
Sorry.
Can you share the link as well?
Not right now. I would have to clean my notebook afterwards.
Okay.
So I cannot share it right now. So the first step is I'm just importing few libraries, and I'm using the transformers library to for creating the pipeline, the trainers, etc. Then there is the SFT trainer, the self supervised trainer, and then there is the PFT model that I would be using. what would be important for you after the workshop would be to understand what is PEFT. Right now, you can think of it as a black box. It's just a way to fine-tune your base model. That's all that you need to understand for now. But there is, of course, some mathematics involved, and you can spend some time after the workshop. So I'm using a data set called SCIT LDR, and I wanted to show you the data set. So this is the data set, and this data set comprises of academic research papers. And this is just the first data point in this data set. So it's just a research paper like of deep learning. And then the output is a TLDR summary of this paper. And the goal of this workshop would be to train our model, a base model on this data set, and give it a research paper, and it should give me a summary, or it should give me a TLDR of that research paper. So I'm just going to show you the next step. So like I told you, the first step would be to load a base model. It can be any model of your choice. I'm using a Microsoft Phi 1.5, and you don't need to understand the code, but what you need to understand are the steps that I'm following. First step is to load the base model, and this is how the model looks like. And what is important is to understand Bijan, if I'm going a bit fast, tell me, because it's my first time doing this. So
Yeah. So I think one thing that you might want to quickly explain is when you say load the base model,
yeah,
what you mean by that, and how do you
so
load the base model? Very high
like I
level.
told, for different tasks, you have different base models. I'm using an open source model. You can also use GPT-4. Like I told you, there are open source and proprietary models. For this workshop, I didn't want to spend any money for this workshop. So I just
So Neeraj,
decided,
are you loading the model into your laptop?
no, it's in Google Colab.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, so I have my runtime set. I'm using a T4 GPU.
Okay.
So even after the workshop, you can run the same notebook. It should work, yeah.
So sorry, I have a question. Before you said one of the cons to use a proprietary base model like ChatGPT was that you couldn't to customize or to train,
Right.
no? Or I understand, but sorry. Why don't you use Llama, for example, for this workshop? Or how can
I will not be
GPT?
able to load it on Google Colabs. It's too big. This is a very small model, 5.5.
Okay. Okay. The model is Microsoft Phi.
Yeah,
Okay, I understand.
yeah, because you need a lot of computational power for Llama, and I didn't want to do that right now.
Okay.
Okay, so you have the base model. The next is in this specific use case, I'm just saying this is the prompt I would be sending to the model once it's fine-tuned. Summarize the following academic content, and I will pass instead of the source, it's going to be the abstract of the research paper. So this is one example how it would look like. So this is the research paper, and this is the output of the data set. So you can just go through the data that this is just a sample data set that I wanted to show. So these are research papers from this ArcSIFT website, and there are a lot of research papers. And what it's just doing, it's going through this abstract, and there are human reviewers who have created a TLDR summary of this paper. But you can use the same notebook for any other task if you want to summarize your own data set. You just have to create a data set in this format and run the pipeline in the same way.
A quick question posted from Alicia. She's asking, is the TLDR the output of the model?
Yes, yeah.
Sorry, just to clarify, when you have the model and then like the TLDR is the output of you running the model, or you're refining the model to create
Yeah.
different TLDRs. But like, are you hard coding, or sorry, are you input? You said a human put in this TLDR or this.
Right.
Okay.
So this is the data set I'm going to use to fine tune the model. I want my output to look in this specific format. So when the model is fine tuned, I'm going to give, this is a test data set, I'm going to give it. And my hope is to get a better summary in this specific format that the human reviewers have created. If you understand what I mean.
Okay.
So TLDR is a summary of a format that we expect an output in.
Right. Yes.
Thanks.
So the base model was not trained on this data set. And now I have the base model. I want to create my own customized model on this specific data set where the input is the academic paper, the abstract of the paper, and the output is a TLDR summary.
So
And
just quick question, Neeraj. So TLDR is something that our human reviewers have written down. That's the
right.
output that they want. And we would want to train the model in such a way that it comes as close to the TLDR as possible.
Yes.
Oh,
That is correct.
I mean, TLDR is a training set, basically.
Yes. That's right.
So I have a question. How does the training model recognize, like, do you have you partition between this is the input and this is my expected output, or it just goes like together, summary as well as TLDR?
So
the question is, Neeraj, I think, where it is labeled and where is the labeling information?
Yeah.
So this is the data set that I created is the label data set. And let me go back. So I have the training data set. It has a source and target.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
So this is, I'm going to use the data set and put it in the model and train it. So if I change this,
and Neeraj, when we are picking the base model,
okay, my
because
call crashed, I think. Yeah, so this is the second data point. And similarly, the target would change for this.
Yeah.
So this is the data set that I'm going to use. I have created a pipeline. I'm going to put this data set in the model, fine tune it. And then I'm going to give it, let's say for this, this would be my test data. I'm going to give the abstract of this data, and I want as an output the TLDR of this paper, which is as close as to the training data set's TLDR.
Okay. To check if I understand, the basic idea is to add this training data to affect the weights in the network to select the result, taking into account this new deep learning information. No, something like that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Neeraj, is it also possible to provide the training data respective to individual parameter of the base model, or it is always generic?
What I mean?
What I mean is that, okay, one thing is that we are focusing on the particular domain.
Yeah.
But within the domain, can we focus on particular feature? Training of a particular, how would I say? So
can you give a concrete example then?
Say as an example, suppose the base model is GPT-4, and I have another question for GPT-4, but suppose base model is GPT-4 and our context is medical.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I just want to trained for the what we call the medical dictionaries. So what I mean
Yeah.
is that just the dictionaries, and I would be able to provide the dictionary, medical dictionary. You are aware of that, like Medra and WhoDD, which are
Yeah.
the drug dictionary, right?
Right.
Generally, I need to provide the entire context, but is it possible while fine tuning, I could just provide the dictionary to fine tune?
So yes, so there are different types of downstream tasks. Right now, I'm using a simple input-output task. If it's, yeah, you can provide a dictionary, but there would be a limit to the tokens. So you have to clean your data set in a way that the model accepts. You cannot
So what
just take the dictionary input. You have to do some data transformation.
So what you're saying, as far as theoretical feasibility is, the answer is yes. However,
Yeah.
practically, if you just want to dump the entire dictionary, it might be difficult, right?
Yeah, it has to be whatever the input of the model. It has to be in that for the dimension of the data set should match.
Yeah.
So there will be some kind of padding or end of sentence involved.
And just one more, Neeraj, question is that is the training is only possible to the open source models?
No, you can also train GPT-4. You can fine tune on top of GPT-4.
Okay, so
it is possible, yes, but there is less customization out there.
I guess if I can maybe, Anand, let me know if I'm changing your question too much, but I think what you're trying to kind of ask is, in order for you to fine tune a model, and use it as a base model, what do you need to have as the ingredients of the base model to be able to use it? Is it just like weights and biases, or do you need anything else? Is that your question, really? Like, you're kind of trying to understand when can you use what's out there as a base model and when can you not? And I guess the way you would answer that question is, what do you need for the base model to be used for fine tuning?
Yeah, I mean, that's the inline question.
There are different types of tasks for using LLMs, right? It would be a question answer, summarization, text completion, and for different purposes, you would have different models. So whatever is your downstream task, what is your use case, depending on that, you have to customize your data.
Got it.
And do some transformation. So in this case, this specific library, it already does the customize. It gives me the data and this train test. You would have to split the data set, create the source and target, and also other types of transformations.
Got it. I have one
So
more question.
I can understand this is a very complex topic if you have never done this. So since it's my first time, I realize now I made it a bit too advanced. But,
no, Neeraj, it's making sense. Like, at least we are getting there.
That's what we wanted. We wanted people to kind of understand all these complex topics, at least become familiar with it. And I think throughout these questions, the concept is becoming more and more clear to them.
Right.
So,
anyways, I wanted to finish, then I can take the questions.
Sure.
So
do you want to finish it? And then there are, I know, a few questions that are kind of in the line. Chaitali, Matushrati, and then I think earlier there was one more person, if I'm not mistaken. It was Kritika. So we'll come back to you guys in a minute.
Yeah. So I have the base model now, and now I'm going to fine tune it. And there is this concept of LoRa, which I didn't finish in my slides, but you can read this later. So this will help me. These are some hyperparameters that I'm going to use. Then I'm going to create a PEFT model. What PEFT model will do is that it will just train the last few layers of the base model. Then I'm just saying I want to save my fine-tuned model in the specific directory. And this is just some, what's the English word? It's just creating some these are some hyperparameters for the model. So the learning, if you have taken the workshop or for any machine learning model, there are hyperparameters, the number of epochs. For this workshop, I just ran it for one epoch, but ideally you would run it for 100 or 50, whatever is your if you want to increase the accuracy, the model needs to learn and generalize. But I'm keeping it very simple out here. Then I'm initializing the trainer. And the next step is actually to train the model. And you see that I ran it for one epoch, and then I have the training loss and validation loss. And in one epoch, you see the training loss is not going down significantly. But if I were to run this for more, let's say 100 epochs, the accuracy, the loss would go down. And my results would be much better. So I will show you my results right now are not that great because I just trained this model for one epoch. Then I'm going to do the inference. So I just wanted to show you the inference. So I'm going to just take this research paper and 1 minute. I'm going to replace my, so I've just written some code to get the abstract of, like I've written a code to get this abstract and then run the inference. So it's just, okay, sorry, I think my kernel crashed. Okay, no problem. So what I'm just doing is I have the fine-tuned model now, and I'm using this fine-tuned model to get the TLDR of a specific research paper. So you can go on this website, and there are a lot of research papers. For me, my favorite subject is finance. I read a lot of finance papers. So I just, let's say I want a TLDR of this paper. So I'm just going to take this ID, put it here, and run the inference on the fine-tuned model. And the output would look something like this. So right now you see the accuracy is not that great because I just ran it for one epoch. But that was the whole pipeline. Like you take the base model, you create your data set, you train it on that data set, and you do an inference on the fine-tuned model. So I can take questions. I know this was too much information, but
thank you so much. Let me kind of ask a couple questions that I saw people might not, they've kind of posted or they're wondering. One question is, what is an epoch, right? Maybe you can kind of quickly describe what is an epoch and then what is a step within an epoch.
So epoch is an iteration. It goes through this one iteration where the model tries to learn some parameters. And in every epoch, the hope is that as number of epochs increases, the training loss goes down. And we don't want the model to just fit on the training data set. We want the model to generalize. And the more number of epochs you train your model, the better the model gets at generalizing.
Is an epoch a training set? So if you have a set of 100 papers that you're going to train it on, is each one of them an epoch?
So not really. You can split your data set in batches, and yeah, you're right. Yeah, in one epoch you will train it on the entire data set.
I mean, Vishy, another way to kind of think about it is that an epoch is a round. It's an iteration of training, of changing the weights and biases. It's a complete round. And the more you do this whole process, right, the more it gets generalized.
So it's one cycle of forward propagation followed by
cycle, maybe it's the right term.
backward propagation.
Yeah, cycle is the right term.
Okay.
Automated cycle, right? It's a automated.
And that's usually done on one training set. So if you have M training sets, with an input and an expected output, you go through one of the data set, that's one training cycle. So I guess that's an epoch. And you do multiple of these to fine tune the model. Got it. Thank you.
Neeraj, what's a step in an epoch?
So when you have a data set, you divide your data set in small batches, batches of 64. And so in one step, you will have those 64 data points go through the loop. And then in the next step, another 64 till you reach, let's say, the maximum number of data points that needs to be trained. So that's a step.
So for example, if you're loading this research paper, we might take the first 64 characters in that, and that would be a step in the epoch.
No, let's say you have 64 you have 1,000 research papers, and I have a batch of 64. So first 64 would be trained first in the first step, and in the next step, the next 64 research papers, etc. The abstract of the next 64 research papers.
So is it something you define at this, like you always define the
Yeah.
number of epochs? Similarly, you define the steps as well, is it?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Neeraj, one question is why are you choosing 5.3? What is the advantage you are getting in comparison to other
It's
large
no, there
models?
is, it's just a smaller model for the workshop. There is no advantage.
But have you used it for any production use case so far? Because it's the latest new model,
Yeah.
right?
I have, but I cannot talk about it openly. Yeah.
Okay. And where are you hosting normally? I mean, hosting the fine-tuned models? Because the cost variations are quite
Yeah.
observant, no? Different clouds.
Yeah, for me, it's on Azure. I'd usually host it
Okay.
on it.
Okay. And that classic case where the model like forgets, the forgetfulness, right? Are you doing anything to take care of that while doing the PEFT with LoRa?
Well, I use my applications. I use a hybrid approach of fine tuning plus RAGs. So it's not that. So depending on use cases, you might have to use both. If
Okay.
your use case is a search related task where you are trying to extract, if you're doing information retrieval, then you would still need to use RAGs, because even a fine-tuned model could hallucinate. It would not find the right information. But if it's text summarization, text completion, then you don't need RAG.
No, I'm not talking about hallucination. I'm talking about what we have observed it when we are doing the fine tuning. Sometimes whatever knowledge the model has, it forgets, right? The forgetfulness of the model during fine tuning. That is the risk, right? So
Yeah, so
any precaution
you have the entire, I can give you a nice resource on this entire. So we have to retrain we have to keep retraining the model. It's not that you train it once and then it's over. As new data comes, the model needs to remain fresh, and you have this entire field of LLM ops.
No. I'm not talking about retraining. I'm talking about whatever data the model already has, it forgets, right? During the fine tuning, that is the risk of training, retraining, or fine tuning a LLM, right? That it may forget what it has already learned, because LLMs are actually a big repository of data, right? So I got it. Okay, thank you.
All right, I want to go to Kritika because she had her hand up long time ago and we kind of continued. Kritika, I'm curious to know if you had a question that you wanted to ask. Maybe you can go ahead now and then we'll continue.
Hey, Bijan, yeah, thank you for calling that out. I was multitasking, so I forgot that I had my hand raised up. So firstly, just thank you for organizing this. This is great. I had two things to share. One is a comment, the other one is a question. The comment is, it'll be really nice if time permits, or, as per the plan for the community, we can have like real life examples of PMs sharing how they went about, or what complications they ran into, or, whatever they can share from their real world experiences. That'll be great to hear. Secondly, my question was more around, and that's a question for Neeraj. There is this like RAG 2.0 approach that is coming from contextual AI, and I'm just wondering what thoughts Neeraj has on fine-tuning versus RAG 2.0.
Sorry,
I mean,
what
I
is
took
RAG 2.0? I'm not aware of this
So what
term.
contextual is doing, as per my understanding, is that they're optimizing the end-to-end workflow, and not just like right now, what a lot of companies, people who are trying to do is like you optimize or you pick and choose, make decisions about each element or each component for building like an AI app or AI
Mhm.
agent, whereas they're optimizing the whole workflow as part of
Okay.
RAG 2.0. But that's okay. We can take that
yeah.
offline. I'll connect with you
Yeah.
later. But yeah, thanks for sharing that thought that fine tuning and RAG also go hand in hand for different use cases. So that was a good insight and learning for me.
So I will give you example of one use case. I am training for my own personal. I journal every day on this website called 750words.com. I write every day, and usually I am having a writer's block. So I have almost 2 years of data, and I have trained a model, and then I just ask the model, what should I write about today? And the model, based on my previous data, it gives me some outline, and then I start writing. So this is how I'm using it personally. I'm not sure if it was interesting, but this is the personal use case. But I wanted to do the workshop on that, but it had a lot of personal information, so I decided not to show that. But if you have some productive use cases in your daily life, you can train your own model. If you have some data created, if you are journaling, etc., if you have writer's block, then it's a great way to create your own private model, and you don't share it with anyone.
Got
It's
it.
a really
And
good
are you,
example of how you're using additional data sets, basically. Right.
yeah. Yeah. And are you using a tool or did you just code that up for yourself?
No, I did it by myself.
Okay.
What do you mean by tool? No, I did myself.
So
I wrote the
I
entire.
know that there are low code, no code tools for fine tuning, right? Like Replicate is there for, I think, images. I don't know if there is something like a low code, no code tool for text, like fine tuning text.
Yeah, I don't like these no code tools. So I do it. I just code it. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Gonna go to Vinny. Their hand has been up for a long time. Go ahead.
Thank you. This was a great class. Thank you so much. So I did have a question about the hypertuning of the model because that's a big component whenever deploying the model itself. So is there a reason or is there any, could you just like go over as to why certain training hyperparameter selection models might work better than the other? For example, grid search may not work for an LLM model like this. Am I right? Or I don't know. So yeah, that's basically my question.
So this is an experiment that you have to do. You have to play with different hyperparameters to get the accuracy as high as possible. And with grid search, you delegate this task. You give a bunch of parameters and it tries to find the optimal one. That's the whole idea. Yeah, but this is an experimentation, and mostly they say that keep the learning rate at this based on a lot of research. You have certain values, but you would have to run experiments, and then there is the MLOps, there is the experiment tracking, and based on then your data scientist will sit and actually train these models, get the optimal weights, and then deploy it.
Got it.
It's not that this one hyperparameter will work every time. It's depends on the quality of your data set and a lot of other factors.
Got it. So there is like nothing which restricts from using, say, for example, grid search on an LLM model when training it.
No, but yeah, for this it would have been too complicated to do that in the workshop, so I didn't do it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, go ahead, Matt Hushrati, and then after that, Sylvia.
Thanks, Bijan. And yeah, you pronounced my name like very well. All right, so I have a PM question. So consider a B2B scenario, okay? Say I may have a need to incorporate a GenAI model for a specific domain, say IT service management, license management, which are niche domains, right? And in order to incorporate this model, I may have to choose a foundation model to start with that I can train for my specific requirements. So I have two questions there. What factors play a role in choosing which foundation model I should pick? Cost is one factor, of course, and the need or the usage would be another, but is there anything else that I may not know? Second question is, who makes this decision? So I see, I can always guide on the needs of the users here, but then are there architects, or it's a combination of people who would take the call, uh, combined in a combined manner? So that's my question.
Sorry, quick question. Are you talking about it in the context of fine tuning or in general? Like what foundation?
Uh, in general, because this
Okay.
kind of just triggered the
Yeah.
conversation.
So the only reason I'm asking is because just we're trying to kind of like really stay focused on fine tuning. If that's okay with you, I'll make a note of it. We'll do a session on how to choose your foundational model. But maybe you can kind of connect with Neeraj offline. But for the purpose of this session, let's stick to fine tuning because I think that's kind of the area that we're going really deep on.
Sure, thanks a lot, Bijan.
Hopefully
I'll
that's
just post my question in the chat, and
Sure.
probably we can take it in another
Are
session.
you
Thanks so
part
much.
of the cohort? I can't remember.
Yes.
Okay, perfect, cool. So then you know what? Post a question in our private Slack channel, and I and Corey and Neeraj are checking it all the time. You can also post it on our website in the forum, and we'll be able to answer that as well.
That
Okay,
will be
go
great.
ahead,
Thank you.
Silvio.
Thank you, Vision. To understand the use cases where I have to use or I need to use deep learning versus RAG, is it right to think that RAG runs over a well-trained model, and it is to give context to the well-trained model, and meanwhile deep learning is when your model is not responding as I wanted?
So what do you mean by, well, you can have a generic model, and you want to provide context because this model has been trained on a wide array of data, Wikipedia data, and it does the task of text completion and text summarization. So you would use RAG to provide context. It doesn't matter if it's a good or bad. If you want to find some information, then you can use a normal large language model. But if you want to refine your answers in a specific format, in a way that you write, like let's say in my case, when I do journaling, sometimes I want the model to write in my own tone. And that's when I would that's why I have fine-tuned my own model, because sometimes I don't have the passion to write, let's say, but I still wanted to give me an outline in my voice, and then I just complete it. Then I expand on those ideas. That's one example. But there must be some other B2B enterprise example where you have a custom data set. Let's say, what could be one example? Let's say you have a CRM system and you have customer inquiries and you are replying in a specific format, in a specific tone. So you would train a model with that data set, keep the model private, and whenever a customer raises a query, it directly gives the answer in your enterprise's language.
Okay. Well, for example, I don't use deep learning to add information to the network. Then I should have RAG to add information, more information.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's searching something, then you add RAGs. If it's generating an answer in a specific tone, voice, then you would use fine tuning. And if you want to do both, then you would do both. Yeah.
That is clear for me. Thank you.
Awesome, that's great. More questions? Go ahead. I can see Anand, your hand is up, but your hand is not up, but you're
Yeah.
I'm guessing you have a question.
Thanks, Vijay. Neeraj, quick, is that any rule that RAG would work better in terms of hallucination or biases in general, or it could happen in any scenario, whether it's a RAG or fine tuning? The quality of the outcome in general.
So if you have, it's like, let's say you have what's the expression? Finding a needle in the hay. Yeah, if you have some text and you want to find some specific information,
Yes.
then you just use RAGs. You put this context to the LLMs, and that's it. You don't need anything else because you just care about the answer to that question. For a customer chatbot type of use case, you would use RAGs. But if it's more alignment of the answer, better quality of answers, then you would use fine tuning. Then you would fine tune your own model.
But the potential hallucination or the possibility of hallucination is more into the RAG.
Yeah. So with RAGs, you have to play with the prompts. You have to do prompt engineering plus RAGs. But there is definitely model will definitely hallucinate. If your prompt is not good enough, it will hallucinate.
So honestly, the decision RAG versus fine tuning, etc. It's actually a very deft decision. It's not a very rule based thing, right? There is a whole lot of thing, and it's actually a scenario based decision, right?
Yeah, it's not an easy decision, to be honest.
And that's why it is more towards the engineering side.
Yeah.
Instead of the product management side, it's more like a terminology understanding for us. And
I think a technical PM would have to make this decision.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So Vijayan, the understanding of everything, I mean, in this context is more about to participate in the discussion and proactively maybe go to the engineering team, right? We are not doing good, and is it possible to think about the fine tuning, etc., right? At least start the conversations, right?
Yeah, and knowing what it means when they tell you we're thinking about fine tuning, or saying that, oh, in order for us to do fine tuning, we need additional data sets, right? Like that would be the responsibility of the PM to figure out a way to give additional data sets, right? Especially in the way that they need it. So, and then you have to develop a data strategy for that, right? So, knowing what fine tuning is allows you to kind of be valuable team member to the engineering team to make it happen when it's a good solution for you guys.
Making sense. And when you're going to the engineering team, you start knocking your head as well that do I have the data set as there is a source which I should go, or rather than not.
Or do I need to buy it, or do I need to go find a partner, or like, and is it going to be sustainable, and is the data going to expire after a while, and if it's going to expire, when is it going to expire, what's going to be our process for dealing with expired data? Like there's all these different things that you kind of have to think about when you're thinking about incorporating some sort of a Gen AI into your existing product tech stack, not even like a brand new product that is all AI first.
So I would just say that in this workshop, I just focused on the decoder model, but there is also, you can also fine tune the encoder model for, let's say, sentiment analysis. So I have not covered that part, but yeah, that is also something you need to look into.
Sure.
Awesome. That's great. So getting a lot of positive feedback, first of all. I want to kind of, acknowledge that and say, Neeraj, thank you so much. Let me see if we can go through one more question. And then before we wrap it up, maybe I'll come back to you, Anand. I would love to have you share your experience about the cohort in a minute. So I'll go to Shrikant, and then we'll see if we can do Saurabh as well. Go ahead, Shrikant.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. So Neeraj, we have now fine-tuned this model, right? Now, how would we evaluate that this is better than the base model? Like, what would we consider, like, other than the human, feedback?
So one approach is you ask LLM directly, and you let another LLM generate the answers, and then you compare the output between two LLMs. That's one way to evaluate. Or you create a benchmarking data set. You sit down with your use case and you create the true labels of the data set, and then it's standard machine learning process to evaluate. So you would use different LLMs to get the output and compare the outputs.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're gonna go to the last question. Surab, go ahead. Hopefully very quick.
Yeah. Hey, Neeraj, thanks a lot for the presentation. Really appreciate it. So just wanted to understand what we saw today, the strategy, the fine-tuning strategy that we saw today. Is it only limited to textual TLDR approach, or for
No,
example,
like
yeah.
I said, I also used it for my journal
Yeah, but is
thing.
this, yeah, but that is more like, textual based, right? You're putting in text and getting a TLDR text. But what if I wanted to have a real life use case application for an underwriting model for a fintech company where you want to take a decision on giving a loan to someone or not based off of certain parameter, and then giving an answer saying that your loan was rejected because of so and so reasons? Is there any kind of real life application for this, or can we use this strategy for same application?
I think you might have to change the base model, but the approach remains the same. For underwriting, you would create your data set with credit defaulters, whatever is the use case, that would be your data set. Then you train the model on that, because in the end, you want to reply with a specific answer. Is the credit approved or not? Whatever is the use case. But I think for fintech related, you would need the base model has to be in the finance area.
Yeah. But then the approach that we saw in your presentation today
it's the same.
Broadly will remain the same. Okay.
Yeah. Like I did in my slides, I covered some more advanced concepts, but yeah, the approach is the same. Yes.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. This was an amazing session. We're gonna have another fun session next week, guys. We're just getting started. So next week we're gonna do a session on AI agents and how you can connect multiple AI agents to get so much more. So if you're thinking, I want to build a one-person billion-dollar company, this is the session you want to attend, because you're going to learn how to bring things together, right? So with that said, Anand, I would love to hear, I know I'm just like calling you on the spot. You're going through the cohort. What's your experience been so far? Maybe you can share with the community. Hopefully it's positive.
Is this me, Vijay?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So personally speaking, in the start of the cohort, Vijay, we connected. I told you that what I love is the structured, the structured way of knowledge. And the beauty is, at least our instructor is the way he is structuring the information, the data, and controlling the time. It's really fantastic. I'm very, very satisfied. And it is a combination of the knowledge, which is more like information or theory. But then we are doing the workshop, and you will not you surprised, but what we are enjoying is that the surprise is practical for the PMs, right? So mostly what we think of that, okay, the workshop or the practical thing for the engineering team, this doesn't work that way, right? So right now what we are working on, say as an example, the PRD, and in parallel, we are doing the little workshop as well, where we are brainstorming whether it's a particular use case is rule-based versus it should be required the LLM versus other ML model and stuff like that, right? So it's a combination, and if you are able to relate with what you're doing in your office, it gives you a whole lot of sense. And thank you so much, Bijan, because I'm sure that there's a whole lot of brainstorming with you and team has done to produce something like that. It is not just come out of the blue. It's definitely whole lot of behind the scene effort is going on. So thank you so much for you and on for the entire team which is working behind the scene, right?
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing that feedback. And I strongly encourage anybody who hasn't participated in our learning program, really go through it. It's the best that could exist in this moment in time for product managers. I really believe in that. And we try to kind of add as much value as we can every single week, even outside the learning program. But what I like about the learning program is it kind of builds the foundation. So you understand the language, and then we actually, throughout these workshops that we do every Friday, continuously, and we actually get to really understand how each of these aspects work. And you look back in a couple of months, you're like, wow, I actually understand it. I know how to speak the language. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate for the positive feedback. And thank you so much, Neeraj, for such an amazing session. For those of you that are wondering, the recording session will be available in the community page, and a link to the either the collab or the PDF will be available. Neeraj and I are going to work through the details. Make sure you attend next week's session. It's going to be really great. It's going to be by another one of our alumni, Ankit, who's going to be running the session. So we're going to see him going through a really interesting topic. Until then, enjoy your weekend and see you soon. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
This is Haritha, and I am Director of Automation at Eversana. And in my past, I have seen AI projects, generative AI projects, but there was always some level of discomfort when approaching with questions to the engineers and architects, because just a lack of understanding of the technology. Well, I used to read online, learn some, do some self-learning, but it's hard to retain until you start putting something together on your own. And that's what the cohort helped us do is, introduce all the concepts, and we could go back and read more about it. Plus, applied immediately towards the end of the cohort. And that gave us much more confidence in talking to our engineers, our data people, and even trying to analyze a problem and see how a machine learning solution would fit in here. So huge shout out to Bijan and Kai for helping us in there. And I can personally vouch for this cohort, because the kind of confidence that I got have now before compared to what I had before cohort is like night and day. I understand the concepts more. I know what I should ask my engineer. So highly recommend it.